Last time on Corn Controversy.
Gentlemen, behold! Corn!
Oh, well, hey. This is pretty nice.
Good!
A few months ago, I did a video discussing the Corntroversy, following one of Budlight's more intriguing and engaging commercials of all time. Somehow, a Game of Thrones tie-in with the Bud Light night got so many people so riled up. It caused infighting amongst the big three breweries, got craft beer divided, discussing whether corn syrup was an acceptable ingredient or not. And it even somehow got the corn farmers of America to take up arms against Bud Light. But we discussed Bud Light's motives, and we discussed the ramifications of the commercial on the greater industry. We also discussed corn syrup's effect on beer, both in the brewing and fermenting process, and decided that it was not really that big of a deal. So I thought I was finally done talking about corn syrup and beer. But the news stories kept coming in over the next few weeks, and it got to the point where it could no longer be ignored. Today, we are going to discuss the Bud Light Super Bowl Corn Fiasco, Part 2, the Lawsuit Boogaloo. Hey everybody, welcome to Life is Brewtiful. I'm Anthony, and today we're going to be continuing on the corn debacle from that whole Super Bowl fiasco. You already got the rundown. Now, I really did not want to continue talking about this. It was kind of like a dead meme to me at this point. But a lot of news stories came out of it, and it continued the conversation, and the discussion just got too deep and too complex that I felt like it needed a second part. I didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had to. Now, unfortunately, it did blow up, so a lot of very, very stupid opinions got thrown into the mix and kind of muddled down the actual conversation. So real quick, let's kick some of that bullshit to the curb. Take this one dumb asshole for an example. They tried to make an argument that because Bud Light chooses to use rice over corn, they are, and this is in their words, not mine, Bud Light is somehow worse for the environment than Miller and Coors because they choose to use rice instead of corn. Because rice farming produces more methane than corn farming.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!
Now, this is despite the fact that neither come close to creating as much as cars or cattle farming. Now, I will give it to them that rice farming is still pretty bad, with an estimated 35% of the Earth's methane production coming from rice farming. But that is in no way Bud Light's fault. Rice is one of the most popular produced items in the entire world, and Bud Light's usage is microscopic in the total demand. I mean, just this year, AB InBev partnered with an agricultural company to develop rice that is grown in a less damaging way to the environment. And that rice, when it is mature and approved by the FDA, will be utilized in AB InBev's products. So your argument becomes less valid the more you look into it, and plus, it was just kind of dumb to begin with. Additionally, there were some arguments about whether or not corn syrup is better or worse for you than rice syrup in an attempt to villainize Bud Light, which, once again, is a dumb conversation in the context of beer. Both ferment out rather clean, leaving little to no residual sugars, so as far as I and the beer community are concerned, this too was a huge waste of time and energy. Well, now that we got all the bullshit out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty of this corn debacle. The big three band is breaking up. Now, in the public eye, Bud Light, Coors, and Miller, they're frenemies. Friendly enough in the public, and they don't really go after each other too aggressively. However, behind the scenes, they're kicking, biting, pulling hair, and biting dirty to get every single percentage of market share in their claws that they can. But before the whole #Corngate thing went down, they were actually about to join forces and work for the betterment of the industry as a whole. But that damn commercial had to go and fuck everything up. What I mean is that before Bud Light dropped that commercial during the Super Bowl, the big three were actually talks about the three big beer giants banding together on a campaign known as Drink More Beer And this campaign would have likely increased beer sales across the board. I'm talking about for Budlight, I'm talking about for Coors and Miller, and even craft beer, probably even international imports into the United States. It probably would have helped beer sales get drug out of its 7-year slump. This project had been in the works for over a year. So not only did it surprise all of us viewers, but it probably really surprised both Coors and Miller as well. Probably rocked them like a haymaker sucker punch straight to the ear. There wasn't a whole lot of information available about the Drink More Beer campaign. However, it would have likely included a lot of major bucks being thrown at some big ideas like advertisement campaign, events and sponsorships, as well as a multitude of other methods to try and get people to drink more beer instead of wine and spirits. But unfortunately, following the airing of these attacks during the Super Bowl in such a big and high-profile way, both Coors and Miller have decided to walk away from the negotiating table, and they are no longer going to be a part of the Drink More Beer campaign. And probably the whole campaign is going to remain on an indefinite hiatus because of it. So since this attack kind of came out of nowhere, we really need to take a step back and reanalyze Bud Light's motives. We didn't even know why the hell would they do something so reckless if there was so much on the line. Well, the easiest answer is usually the right one. So it's likely because they are just a bunch of dicks. But to break it down a little bit more, Bud Light would actually probably lose a whole lot more in a recovering market than they would in a failing, declining one. Without a doubt, Bud Light is the biggest and most powerful beer producer on the planet. And even in a 5th consecutive year of declining sales, they are still beating the absolute pants off of all of their competitors around the globe. You could stack Coors, Miller, and craft beer together and not scratch the surface of the number that Bud Light pulls globally. Now, the problem is, over the several year decline that we talked about, beer sales as a whole have gone down, but craft beer sales as a whole have continued to go up. They're starting to plateau a little bit, but they're still on the rise where big beer is going down. So by ruining this campaign, it further stagnates craft beer. And when everyone else starts falling to the wayside due to low sales and tarnished beer image, Bud Light's going to be left standing tall, ready to take advantage of all the free real estate. Joining forces with other breweries in a beer alliance would help their biggest competitors. But not helping anyone only helps Bud Light. And that's exactly why I think they started all this drama. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it seems like the overwhelming response to this aggressive anti-corn campaign was incredibly negative and may have caused a massive backfire on Bud Light. Polls following the initial airing of the advertisement were pretty good, with lots of people enjoying the debacle and thinking that the commercial was mostly just humorous. But as viewers had time to think on it, those opinions dropped, and the commercials now are seen as mostly negative or pointless. On top of that, it seems sales of Bud Light actually took a significant drop because of the negative response, while Coors and Miller sales either stayed the same or even rose slightly. And that's just with their core audience. Now, of course, most craft beer fans would never be swayed by a Bud Light commercial. And honestly, that's not what this commercial was intending to do. It wasn't intending to get them. That's not the target audience. They're aiming for big beer fans. However, I do want to discuss a little bit about how craft beer fans perceived it. And a comment left by my friend David on the Corn Debacle episode 1 really opened my eyes to how this commercial and how this conflict is being viewed in the eyes of the craft beer community. He wrote, "I thought it was absolutely hilarious, as you said, in regards to just enjoying a commercial, which I did initially. But rewatching it and looking at it from a craft beer lover and brewer's perspective, I hate it. Craft beer is still looked down upon when compared to spirit and wine drinkers, still maintaining a more prestigious look by drinking wine and spirits. You don't see wineries dissing wineries or distilleries dissing distilleries. The craft beer scene continues to grow, and we need the larger companies to not stir the pot by making craft beer look even less distinguished. If we as brewers want beer to have a better image, we all need to work together and promote beer drinking in general." Which is exactly the way I think most beer drinkers, macro and craft, felt about this commercial, which in turn explains how it backfired so spectacularly. So that's definitely something to think about. Even though Bud Light's trying to start a war, the best way we could counteract all of this negativity and continue to enhance the overall beer industry would be just ignore it and continue to live a peaceful life. If they want to be a douchebag, whatever. But a general rule of thumb, you never feed the trolls. However, Miller and Coors, whether it's pride or just arrogance and stupidity, they decided that they were going to retaliate. Coors and Miller kind of went on an aggressive PR attack. They decided that, hey, we're not the bad guys because we use corn syrup. Bud Light's the bad guy because they don't like corn. So they started a campaign to show that everybody's using corn, even craft beer, which made some get a little defensive. But then they started actually visiting rural farming communities and campaigning on the behalf of corn farmers, letting them know who really had their backs.
It's become like the Boston Tea Party of beer wars. Iowa corn farmers pouring out their Bud Lights, and now Coors is making big moves, hosting parties across the state to win them over.
Miller Coors CEO Gavin Hattersley is here to toast Iowa farmers.
And we want the Iowa farmers to know that we appreciate them.
And at the Hitching Post in Bevington, now these decorations seem out of style.
It's Coors Light area. Coors Light country.
In addition to actually going and visiting the corn farmers of America, both Coors and Miller heavily participated and started the hashtag A Toast to Farmers internet campaign, whereas they went and actually visited them in person, they kind of did the same thing online and got people around the country to go on Twitter and post pictures of them actually toasting their products in support of these corn farmers and the products that they make and the products that they make together. Beautiful harmony between corn and beer.
Today is National Toast to Farmers Day, and I am here at one of our local breweries, Ology, celebrating our farmers and everything they do for our state. So raise a pint with me.
Weirdly enough, Anheuser-Busch, who basically started this whole thing, got them and their subordinates, to include Busch and Bud Light, to also engage in it. So a little bit of a mixed message going on there, but whatever. Miller started a series of commercials aimed at Bud Light and defending the proud Miller name. And Coors tried to take the high road, making these nifty beer dispensers that gave away free beer whenever Bud Light attacked them online.
Introducing the Coors Light. The first smart beer tap that listens for Bud Light negativity and lights up when it finds it, signaling the next round of Coors Light is on us. The more they keep talking, the more we keep refreshing.
But things were really taken to the next level when Miller announced that they would be suing Bud Light over the ads, which they call misleading and false. Miller is suing to stop the malicious advertising campaign and is requesting a trial by jury as well as compensation for their legal fees. Miller went on to say, Bud Light purposefully misled consumers into believing that there is corn syrup in Coors Light and that Miller Lite when there is not. Unfortunately, that's about where we are in this story. And because of that, unfortunately, there's probably going to be a corn debacle part 3 whenever this lawsuit concludes. I think I figured out the best way that I want to sum this video up. And that is every single person lost. Bud Light lost because they pissed off the corn farmers of America or whatever, and their plan backfired on them, and they lost market share. Miller and Coors, they both lost because even though they took, they were the victim of Bud Light, they try to bounce back, but they're still in a bad beer industry, and they're probably their best shot at fixing the whole thing for everyone was ruined because of it. So Bud Light caused them to lose as well. Craft beer lost because, like Miller and Coors, we are victims of the industry collapsing, and the one thing that might have been able to save us, the one good deed big beer could have done for us, they fucked up, or one of them did. So that hurts us. But plus, our biggest competitor right now isn't so much big beer, it's more so wine and spirits. And like my friend David said, because of that negative perception we're getting, we're looked at like children, whereas wine and spirits looks much more respectable, much more adult beverage. They're not squabbling in the mud like a bunch of whiny divas. But lastly, and most importantly, I lost because I have to keep making this series. But seriously, I really don't think anybody won here. I don't think that there was anything that Bud Light could have done that could have hurt the industry worse. You know, once this information came out and became a little bit more public knowledge that the whole key to fixing the industry was in their hands, and then they just fucking blind shotted it, you know, from half court, obviously airballing it. I don't know. I don't even think it really matters what happens in that lawsuit. So anyways, we'll just have to see how this story continues to develop. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the corn debacle part 2. And maybe in a year or so, we'll get the final dramatic conclusion of this corn bullshit. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. And remember, there is a story in every bottle, and that life is beautiful. Cheers.